Have you ever seen a movie where they find a body in a house and the body has been dead for a few days? If you'll look, and I've noticed this before, in that room, if there's a window, there will be little black dots on that window. There should be little black dots on that window. And if in your manuscript you have a dead body in a room and there's a window in that room, you might want to mention the little black dots on the window. It'd be an interesting addition. Want to know why? Well, you will just have to listen to this episode of the FightWrite podcast. I am your host, Carla Hoke. In our last episode, I talked with David Morales of BioTechs Crime and Trauma Cleaning Services. We discussed his job and how it is different than CSI, and it is very different. He walked us through a cleaning, what he looks for, what he does, and how he disposes of bio-waste. And yes, we found out how he gets blood out of carpet. That's kind of a trick question. You'll have to listen to the last episode to find out how he does that. Why is blood dangerous? If you'll go to the blog FightWrite, FightWrite.net, and look on the post at the dangers of having dead bodies around, you will learn the problem with having blood on the floor. You'll also learn about how long different pathogens like the hantavirus and Ebola live outside the body. Super interesting. It will make you wash your hands forever. In this episode, David answers questions from writers, and at one point, he talks about decomposition. If you aren't familiar with the stages of decomposition, check out the FightWrite podcast from October 7th. You can also go to FightWrite.net, or you can just turn to the fifth round in my book, FightWrite, FightWrite, How to Write Believable Fight Scenes with Writer's Digest. I think it's actually on sale right now on Amazon. So get it while the getting's good. FightWrite, FightWrite, How to Write Believable Fight Scenes. Okay, let's get to this episode with David. If you want to know more about his services, and we do talk about his services, it's more than just crime and trauma cleaning. He also does hoarding cleaning. And we'll talk about, this is a really good episode. You need to hear this episode. We'll talk a little bit about hoarding in this one. But you can find out more about his services at biotechssouthhouston.com, BIOTechSouthHouston.com. Okay, guys, listen in. Okay, for the listeners who haven't had a chance to listen to the first podcast in this series, David, tell us about your company and what you do.
Yeah, so I own a company called BioTechs. We are a crime and trauma scene cleanup company. And what we do is we come in after the fact, anytime there's biohazard present, and we are the cleanup guys, basically. You know, we come in and help remediate, whether it's houses, apartments, vehicles, anywhere there's biohazard, blood, bodily fluids, fecal matter, anything like that, we come in and clean up after it.
And tell us how you're different from the CSI folks.
You know, the CSI, they tend to investigate, reenact the actual crime scene itself, how it happened, where exactly in the room it happened. Our job is basically just to clean up.
Right. And you're a private entity, correct?
Correct.
All right. You know, you come across some pretty troubling scenes on a regular basis, I'm sure. How do you do that and stay emotionally healthy? Is that too personal a question? I'm sorry.
No, of course not. Of course not. People ask all the time. I think for myself, it helps to know that we are helping families.
Yeah,
we are helping loved ones. I think that's basically what helps me get through the job, knowing that the family members don't have to do what we're doing. No family member should ever have to clean up after a loved one. And that's kind of our driving force and what helps us kind of get through these situations. That's for me personally. So that's how I deal with it.
Did it kind of get to you at first, or have you had this kind of feeling about it, caring for others the whole time?
Yeah, it's never really gotten to me. I think in all the jobs that we've done, I've had two situations where a scene actually kind of made me contemplate, what we were doing and just thinking about, what exactly happened. Other than that, I've never really had any sort of issues, with dealing with it.
You've never had nightmares or anything like that?
I've never had nightmares, anything like that. like I said, there was two different instances where, it just caused me to kind of just take a step back and just kind of, think a little bit more about it. But other than that, no, everything's been good.
I've heard people who work in, funeral director industry and all that, they say the exact same thing. I forget who I was talking to, but it was a mortician who helped prepare bodies and everything. I said, how does this not get to you? And they said, we're doing a very kind thing for the family.
Yeah, of
Well, you
course.
know what? I had never thought about that. And you're saying the exact same thing.
Yeah.
As far as crime scene cleanup, is there a type of crime you're called most often for, like most often for shootings or most often?
Um, as far as crime, I mean, I would say the majority of the jobs that we handle are related to either suicides
Hmm.
or unattended deaths, where,
Oh,
they find somebody that's been there for an extended period of time, and
right,
those are the majority of the jobs we do. I mean, don't get me wrong, we still do our shootings and our
right.
homicides and stuff like that, but it's just, suicides and unattended deaths are the majority of what we do.
Do you ever have to deal with, I don't know how to put it except large pieces of human matter? I don't know what else to say. I mean, do you ever,
Yeah.
I mean,
No.
how do you deal with that?
We've I've dealt with, you know, ears, noses, teeth, eyes, fingers.
Oh my gosh.
Nothing really like a leg or anything of that nature.
Right.
What happens with stuff like that, arm, stuff like that, the police, the medical examiner, they would remove those large parts of the body. Um, Part of it is so that they can have it for the family, maybe for the funeral, stuff like that.
Right.
But when it comes to, eyes and ears and noses and stuff like that, I've seen it too many times.
Well, how do you dispose of it? What's a
It's
protocol for that?
so what we do is we take it and we put them in our biohazard boxes, and those boxes are then incinerated. So per, our OSHA guidelines, we have to have all of our biohazard incinerated.
Right.
So we take all that. It goes in with all the other, whether it's the other cleanup materials and stuff like that we dispose of.
Where is there I mean, is there an incinerator in town that is specifically for biohazard kind of stuff?
Yeah, there's actually a couple around the Houston area. We have a pretty good working relationship with the one we use, and yeah, it's every month they come and they pick up all of our biohazard. We have it stored at a separate location. They pick up all our biohazard, and then it's then incinerated.
Do they ever look in the box, or do you just give them the box and they burn it?
We just give them the box. I don't think they would look in the box. I mean, it might take a certain type of individual to actually go back in there and look in those boxes, but
Right.
I don't think they do. Yeah.
But they're all sealed up in plastic.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
okay.
Yeah.
Are there certain times of the year that you see that you have more activity at your job?
Around the holidays, we tend to see a lot of suicides,
Right.
which is pretty sad. But yeah, around the holidays, we tend to see a lot of suicides. In the summer times, we tend to see a lot more of the unattended deaths because of the heat here in Houston.
Right.
Um, and then of course it's kind of, mix and match in between. But things kind of ramp up in the summer for one, and then, once the holidays come, suicides tend to.
Is there a time of the year where there's more car accidents?
I don't think so. No, there's crazy drivers all times of the
All
year.
the time.
So
Yes, yes, definitely. Okay, and I would assume that when you're cleaning a car, you have the same method as when you're cleaning a home. The carpet comes out, the seat
correct.
comes
I
out.
mean, I've taken, $60,000 trucks and had to take the seats out and pull up the center console, and I mean, we basically I will get all the way down to the metal if I have to, and we have. So yeah, for sure. I mean, if it's got to come out, it's definitely got to come out.
All right. In the last podcast, you mentioned the smell of human death, and I have thought about that probably way too much, but just as much as any writer would. Talk about that smell again. So, I mean, think about it. You have writers that are trying to write that.
Mhm.
Give them an idea of what that's like.
You know, the smell of human death is something that you will never. You'll always know what that smell is the first time you smell it. After you smell it once, you'll always know what it is. There's been times where I've been to a job where I literally open my door and I can already smell it. It is, to me personally, it is a sour, bittery. It's like biting into a lemon that's been out for too long. You know what I mean? It's just,
Yeah.
it has got this bitter, like almost sour milk
Mm-hmm.
type of smell to me. I mean, it's just something that I don't know. To me, it's just bittery. It's sour. It's bittery. It's mushy to me. It's not.
And you said it smelled metallic. You could almost smell the metal in
You
the
you
blood.
can you can almost
So
smell the
weird.
blood. I mean, you can smell the blood, like kind of like a coppery
Right.
type smell to it for sure. Yeah.
Do this, I don't know if this makes sense, but does it smell different when it's a much older person versus a younger person?
Not necessarily an older person. It really depends on the health of the person.
Yeah, I can see that.
Um, and I don't want to offend anybody, but more obese people tend to be a little bit more, I guess worse. You
Right.
know, but it also depends on the environment that they're in. The decomposition of a body is in various stages. If it's cold outside and the AC is blaring, it'll slow it down a little bit. But if we're in the middle of summer, it's 100 degrees and they have no AC,
Oh
it,
gosh.
it's going to be that much worse.
I did read something about a person who does have a higher percentage of body fat, that breaking down of the adipose tissue does have a pretty strong smell. Has there been situations where you're just like, we can't get the smell out of here?
We've never been, in a position where we couldn't get the smell out. Now, there are times where it's taken a lot longer than we had expected.
Hmm.
There's times where we really, really, really had to dig down deep and find, like, man, what exactly we've taken everything out. We've ripped out the sheetrock, we ripped out the studs, and we know it's not there. Come to find out at that particular time, the body had been there for 6+ months, and it
Oh,
was actually in the AC. It was in the vent. So every time the AC would come
oh
on,
my gosh.
then you would smell it. So then we had to use our chemicals up in the vents, and we did that for a couple days and stuff like that. But
How do you
we
get it out of the air ducts? I mean, how do you
well,
clean
we
it?
have we have chemicals that we run throughout the house
Okay.
before, during, and after. But this time we had to literally run them in the actual vents itself. So we had to, open up where the filter goes, and run it through there. And it was probably a week before we finally could, we finally got the smell out. But yeah,
What do you suggest for people who have a shared wall? Like if you have a condo or a townhouse unit where, okay, you have cleaned up this particular scene, the
mhm,
smell in this apartment is gone, but next door it reeks. I mean, does
yeah.
that happen? And what do you do?
I mean, it has happened before. We at that point we need to get into the apartment next door. There was
Oh
there
my God.
was there was a condo we were doing one time where it was in the kitchen, and went underneath the cabinets and everything, and we got all that out and took it out. And I had told the apartment, I said, it's in the next apartment. I said, I
Wow.
know it is, because I can still smell it, and I can still see. So we actually had to go into someone else's apartment, get underneath their cabinet, take all their cabinets out, and there was actually more fluids. There was
Oh,
actually more fluids underneath the next door neighbor's cabinets than the actual person who passed away.
what
And
happened that the
yeah,
fluids went next door? I don't know
well,
what I'm allowed to ask and what I'm not allowed to ask.
no,
As
no, no,
far
of
as
course, of course. So since in a situation like that, I guess the leveling of the actual apartment itself, it was kind of running downhill, I guess you could say.
okay.
And the person passed. Like I said, they just kept smelling it, and I knew it wasn't on our end. So at that point, that's when I told the lady, I said, we have to go look. And it was actually worse. And these poor people were actually still living there, not knowing
Oh my
what was
God.
underneath their cabinets. And this was a week later, you
Oh,
know, and yeah, it was. They had to obviously move them out of there, and it was just kind of a whole big ordeal. But
but
we were able to get it, so that's the good part.
yeah, you mentioned in the last podcast too that, all right, those people, what they were smelling is very different than the smell of like a dead rat underneath your house. You said that
Correct.
animal stink is way different than human stink. Can you
Yeah, the
tell the
the two
difference?
are the two are different. You know, when it comes to human death, there's just a lot of factors that really play into it, and then we touched briefly on it as far as the actual person themselves, the state of the house or the apartment, whatever the case may be. Um, Animals tend to, once they pass, to me, once they pass, that smell kind of stays the same throughout.
Okay.
And when it comes to humans, it only just gets worse.
Okay. Okay. Is there a certain point that you notice that it just doesn't smell quite as bad? I mean, when it starts lessening?
Once any scene you come to, once you get the actual biohazard out of the house,
Right.
I mean, it's almost like night and day. You're still gonna smell it, but it's not gonna be as potent as
Right.
it was. Once you can remove, whether it's a mattress or a piece of
Right.
carpet or whatever that case, once you can get that we tend to call it the elephant in the room. When we address a scene, we always want to attack the elephant first, which is
Right.
like mattress, whatever the case may be. Once you remove that, I mean, you'll start to just completely like it'll be like night and day.
So when you walk into a hoarding situation, and you mentioned in a last podcast, you also handle hoarding situations,
Mhm.
and that you do have a deceased human and a deceased animal. I mean, can you discriminate between those, or do you just walk in, you're like, wow, this is a lot of smells from a lot of blood?
It tends to be a lot of smells only because the fact that they're hoarding as well.
Right.
So
Right.
when they're hoarding, those that just brings a whole nother aspect to it. Once and it's crazy because you might not smell the death as soon as you walk in the house. I mean, until you're actually up on it.
Really?
If it's in a back bedroom, you might not smell it. In a hoarding house because of everything that's in there,
Wow.
as compared to if it was just a regular normal well kept house, you would smell it instantly as soon as you open the door.
So the things that you collect from a hoarding situation, is that also considered biohazard? I mean, even if it's not something that the deceased touched or is.
Yeah, so it depends on how long the body has been there. We've done some hoarding jobs where body's been there a week, week and a half, 2 weeks, whatever the case may be. You know, what happens is that the body starts to decompose and then it attracts, and I'm going to be a little blunt here, so I'm sorry, but it attracts maggots, right? So then
Right.
maggots turn into flies. And so what happens is the flies, they're then infesting the whole entire house. They're
Right.
flying around the whole entire house trying to get out of the house. So you can actually go to the windows and you'll see little spots, little dots, like someone took a marker and just making little dots. And that's actually the flies that are trying to fly out. They're so full of contamination that every time they hit the window or the wall, they're leaving spots everywhere. You know,
Wow.
we've been to other jobs where the whole entire house, I mean, there's flies everywhere. We have to take up the carpet with us. We have to wipe down the walls. I mean, it is a lot that goes into it because that's all contaminated. If there's flies all throughout the carpet or all throughout the floor, and then the police come and the police are just stepping all over those flies,
Oh,
and then they're getting stuck in their boots, and then the police take the boots outside, and then it's in their car and it's in the carpet. I mean, you can only think of everywhere that's being contaminated
right.
throughout the whole entire house. So
So how do you dispose of, like, if you have to take up all the carpet? I mean, do you
mhm.
box that up for the biohazard place
Yep.
too, or
all
when
of
it
it all of it has to be boxed up. All of it has to be broken down, boxed up,
really?
and incinerated. Yes.
Okay, because you see in hoarding shows on TV, they kind of put it in the back of a dump truck and they drive off, and I think, where is that dump truck going? Where is that dump
Yeah.
truck going?
That's going to the landfill. That's going back into the
Oh,
ground. That's where that's going.
that's probably not the best way to handle
And it's not, for sure.
that. Okay. If a writer has a murder scene in their book, how should their character cover up DNA evidence?
You know, that's a good. And my dog is going crazy
I
here.
am
I'm
okay
sorry.
with your dog.
I've got a my wife is walking in the door here, but
That's
um, when it comes to covering up murder scenes, I'm not I'm not sure I'm the best guy to answer that question because we're not typically in
right.
the cover up scene. But what I would do is you know burn it for one,
Yeah. Yeah.
or what they have is like oxygen producing detergents, whether it's
Right.
bleach or stuff like that. It, I mean, you would have to literally replace everything that
Yeah.
whether it's the wall with
Right.
with paint, I would cut the sheetrock out completely, or whether it's
Wow.
the carpet,
Okay.
I would remove it, stuff like that. That's
Okay.
Or you could just burn the whole thing to the ground and
Well, there you go. There you go. Writers do ask really strange questions, and
yeah.
I've gone to the doctor for a checkup, and I forgot that he didn't know I was a writer, and I just asked him, "Hey, where could I shoot somebody that it would take them a while to die?" And he just looked. I said, "Oh, I'm a writer," and he just rubbed his head. He goes, "Oh my gosh," he said, "Okay, it scared me to death."
That's
What are
funny.
some things you think writers of both books and movies aren't quite getting right with violent crime scenes?
You know, that's a funny question. When you sent me these questions, that's one thing I looked at and I had to really, really, really think about. And it's not that I don't think they're not getting it right. I think for the sake of the movies and the books, it might be a little too elaborate, you
Yeah,
know, where
I'm with you.
for a movie, hey, we shoot somebody and then the entire wall is covered,
Yeah,
in blood or whatever. And it's typically not the case, but I don't think it would make for a good movie or a good book if they
right.
just, if they didn't tie that in. I think it's just a little over the edge when it comes to, you know,
The mess.
yeah, exactly. And don't get me wrong. We've done our fair share of scenes where you're thinking, oh my God, like how,
Right,
how is there blood up here or down there or
right.
wherever the case. But I think for the most part, it's not that extensive, if that makes sense.
Yeah. This just popped in my head. Have you ever had to testify in court about anything you've cleaned up?
No, we've never had to. That's a good question. There is another company that I know of that they actually did. One of the guys actually did, but I think by the time it gets to us, really, the police and everybody's kind of done with their
Right,
investigation.
right,
Yeah.
right. As far hopping back to hoarders, has there ever been any, and you may have had so many instances of this that you can't pick out one, any instances when you've gone into a hoarding situation and thought, now that's a strange thing?
The craziest thing when it comes to hoarding, the job that I've done is we had a gentleman call one time and his brother had passed away in his house, in his own house, right? So he
Right.
said, yeah, my brother, they found him. He'd been deceased for I think 3 or 4 days.
Oh,
He passed away in his little recliner watching TV. He was an older guy. Okay. He goes, but I have to tell you that, there obviously, where he passed and stuff, but there's also some urine in the house. And I'm thinking, urine? Okay. Like I said, can you, explain a little bit more? And he says, yeah, he's got a couple of jugs with urine
oh,
in them. So I'm
oh,
thinking, okay, a couple of jugs. Okay. That's, it is what it is. So we get in the house. We, this gentleman was a hoarder. Okay. He obviously passed. We got all the all the chair, everything of that. And, that was probably the easiest part of this job. Okay.
dealing with the jugs of urine.
Correct. So, a couple of jugs of urine turned into 82 milk jugs full of urine. Okay. So what this gentleman would do was he would actually grab a milk jug, he would urinate into the jug, and then he on the jug itself, he would put the date that he did it, the time of day he did it, how long it took him on the actual jug itself. Yeah. So we actually found jugs so this happened last year. So this was 2018, right? So we actually found jugs from all the way back to like 2011.
Wow.
And there's no running water in the house. I was kind of curious. I didn't ask, but I was curious how he, would go number two, basically, with no
Oh,
running water. But yeah, that was probably one of the craziest things we'd seen, just
wow.
jugs and jugs but also just kind of keeping very detailed
Yes, he's very
reports on them.
fastidious about keeping detail. Howard Hughes did that, didn't he? Didn't
Yeah.
Howard Hughes keep his urine in
Did
jugs?
he? I don't
Yes.
I don't know. I
I
don't
don't
know.
know. You know what? That's one of the trends that just never caught on with me. I got to be honest. Stamps, sure. Urine, no.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I am still being asked this question by writers. If you personally, David, get blood on the carpet in your house, what do you do to get the blood off your carpet?
Here's the deal. If it's in my house, say, I cut my finger or something
Right,
like that, I will use some chemicals to on the surface level.
right.
Okay. If you come across a scene where, somebody had passed away on the carpet, get rid of the
Of the
carpet.
carpet.
Right.
Get rid of it. Okay. It might appear on the surface that, oh, okay, everything's great, everything's good. Underneath that surface is a giant ring that you wouldn't even
Really.
believe. Yes. And the last thing you want is for people, whether you have kids crawling on the ground or you
Right.
sell the house and they have kids crawling on the ground, touching the floor, putting them in their mouth. That's
Oh,
the last thing you want to happen.
oh my
So
gosh.
get rid of it if you can.
What would you suggest for those who spill their jug of urine, that they also should just cut it all up?
I would suggest not putting urine in jugs.
I'm gonna suggest that too.
Yeah.
Okay, I was asked to ask you this by a writer, and I thought it was kind of rude, and I told you this question already, and you said you had been asked this question a whole lot of times, so I'm going to go ahead and ask it. Yes, somebody wanted me to ask you, have you ever stolen anything from a crime scene?
Yes.
No,
We
not
actually,
yes, you haven't
no,
stolen.
not,
Yes, you've been
no. Yes, we get that question
asked.
tons of times. But no, we have never taken anything from crime scenes, only because that's just not who we are. That's not what we're about.
What do people think you're going to say?
You know,
Yeah, we clean
I,
them out.
I guess, we've found everything from, jewelry to
Right.
money to, I mean, valuables like you wouldn't believe, but it's just not, that's not what we're about. That's
I
not what
know.
it's just not worth it. That would ride on if I ever did something, that would ride on my conscience more than having to deal
I
with
can't imagine.
someone passing away. So yeah, no,
You know
we do
what?
not.
Speaking of money, what do you do with blood-soaked money?
Blood soaked money is a good question. There's times where we've put it in bags and turned it over to the authorities. There's times where the family has collected it and done whatever.
You're not allowed to destroy money.
We're not. We're not. So
That's a big
we always try to put it in somebody's hands, who, whether it's the homeowner or the authorities, something of that nature. I mean, I've had vehicle, like car vehicles, where
right,
there's coins and stuff
right,
where soaked, sitting in blood, just soaked,
right,
where the family just, here, can we put it in here, then and wash it off, type stuff.
right.
Um, yeah, when it comes to money, we make sure that we always find somebody that we can pass it off to.
Wow. I can't imagine. I mean, I know that if you damage money, that you can take it to the bank for an exchange, but I'm
Yeah.
thinking blood-soaked.
I mean, I don't. I mean, I can't imagine.
I can't imagine that.
Yeah, paying with money that's covered in blood or whatever the case may be. It
Yeah,
might just be a lost cause at that point. I don't
might
know.
be. Well, David, thank you so much. You have the coolest job, and you have been so nice about answering all of my questions and my emails. I appreciate it so, so much. Tell folks again where you work and where you're located.
Yeah, we are a company, BioTechs Crime and Trauma Scene Cleaning. We are located in the greater Houston area, and you can find us on Facebook and Instagram at BioTechs South Houston.
And just to reassure people, you do not post pictures of crime scenes, correct?
We do not. There
Okay,
are
just
companies out
point
there
out.
that will.
What?
There are companies out there on Instagram that will. I strongly dislike those people.
I do too. I think that's very disrespectful.
It is. It is extremely disrespectful to those families. That's something we will never do. So what we like to post and on Facebook and Instagram and stuff is we get involved in the community a lot, whether it's with, police officers
Right.
or kids and stuff like that. And we post about different events that we're at, different charities we're helping, stuff like that. So that's what we're all about.
And remind people, if they did not hear the last one, tell people who the majority of your employees are.
So the majority of all my employees, excluding my wife, are all members of the Houston Fire Department.
I love that.
Yeah.
That is pretty awesome. Okay. Thank you so much for being on the show, David. I can't say thank you enough.
Yes, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much again, David, and everybody out at BioTechs, Crime and Trauma Cleaning Services. I really appreciate you giving me and all these writers your time. Well, folks, that's it for this episode of the FightWrite podcast. Be sure to check out my blog, FightWrite, FightWrite.net, and my book, FightWrite, FightWrite, How to Write Believable Fight Scenes, out with Writer's Digest. You can get it just about darn near everywhere. Yes, it's on sale at Amazon, so I think it would make a perfect stocking stuffer for a writer. And remember, it's not just about fight scenes. If you have any level of violence or even injuries in your work, it's got a lot of great resources. Until the next round at the FightWrite podcast, get blood on your pages.